Settle in. Take a deep, slow breath and let the worries of your day float away. Get comfortable because tonight you're going on a romantic journey to the City of Lights. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the soft, earthy scent of damp stone and fallen leaves as the first light of a September morning filtered through the narrow, cobbled streets of Paris. The city was a symphony of soft sounds in the early light. Julian ran on the cobblestone streets, still slick with the night's dew, and the air was carrying the sweet scent of the first croissants baking in the hidden boulangerie. He jogged past a small flower shop, a riot of pink and white blossoms spilling from its awning and climbing the stone facade like a living tapestry. The owner, a woman in a paint-splattered apron, was just beginning to arrange wooden crates of fresh-cut flowers on the street. A small handwritten chalk sign propped against one crate simply read, "Fleurs de saison," but Julian's gaze was lost somewhere in the middle distance, his mind already halfway across the Atlantic. The lamplights of the cafe exteriors cast a warm, golden glow of the neatly stacked chairs as Julian ran past, a silent observer of a city just beginning to stir. He pushed his pace, his worn running shoes finding their rhythm on the ancient cobblestones as he began to climb a long stone staircase. The worn steps were a fascinating ascent, a steep climb that promised a new view of the district. The sky above him began to brighten from a soft gray to luminous peach, the first rays of morning light just beginning to crest the buildings and drench the rooftops in a warm, golden glow. On either side, the stately Parisian buildings rose up, their cream-colored facades and black wrought iron balconies catching the dawn light. He ran past tall, ornate street lamps, their dark lanterns now extinguished, but their elegant ironwork still silhouetted against the brightening sky. Below, the city was still a study in shadows, but here on the climb, Julian felt nothing but the burn in his lungs, his mind consumed by a list of obligations he was to fulfill. Julian was a man built for the boardroom. His dark, tousled hair contrasted with the clean lines of his handsome face, which was lightly shadowed with stubble. His calm blue eyes held a natural confidence that commanded a room, but today they also held a hint of weariness. He'd left a world of polished marble and endless meetings behind, trading it for this brief, stolen moment of solitude. But even here, his mind was a tangle of spreadsheets and financial figures, strategic thoughts around the acquisition of the historic hotel they were targeting. The pressure from his father was a weight he felt in every step. He continued his run and lost himself in his own thoughts, missing all the beauty that surrounded him. The Seine, a ribbon of calm gray, moved under a thin, misty veil as the soft morning light cast ripples of silver across its surface. He could hear the soft lapping of water against the hulls of the houseboats as he ran past. The trees on the riverbanks were a beautiful mosaic of golds and russets, their reflections shimmering and blurring in the water. He crossed the Pont des Arts, and his feet made a soft, hollow sound on its wooden planks. He ran his hand over the old black iron railings, feeling the echoes of 1,000 padlocks, tiny silent testaments to a love and commitment that felt worlds away from his own. He ran faster, as if he could outrun the pressure of a legacy that kept him bound to a future he wasn't sure he wanted. As the majestic Eiffel Tower came into view, standing tall against a sky blushing with the first light of dawn, Julian felt the full weight of his so-called destiny. He decided to cool down and try to absorb the simple beauty of the moment. Julian's peaceful moment was interrupted by a quiet voice. "Monsieur, if you don't mind, could you move just a bit to the side?" a photographer asked kindly. Julian apologized, his mind snapping back to the present, and took a few steps backward. He made his way off the platform and down a path under a canopy of fall leaves. It was then that he noticed a woman sitting on a bench. As he walked by, she looked up and gave him a friendly smile. He paused. She was a quiet burst of warmth in the cool morning air. Her blonde hair, soft as spun gold, caught the sunlight, and her smile held a kind of private, joyful radiance. He was captivated by the scene, the quiet stillness of her as she sat with her notebook, the pen moving across the page as if driven by a joyful secret. Julian smiled back and continued onward, but he felt a pull to look back. When he did, he found she had already begun to pack her things and left, disappearing in the opposite direction. Julian continued his walk, a quiet sense of wonder about the woman clinging to his thoughts. He entered the cool, formal lobby of his hotel, its polished marble floors and hushed tones feeling stark and impersonal after the warmth of the street. Up in his room, he shed his running clothes and stepped into a cool shower. The spray of water was a welcome shock, a brief ritual that washed away the grit of the city and the anxieties of the day, leaving him feeling clean and focused. He stepped out of the shower, a fresh towel slung over his shoulder, and went to the mirror. The man who looked back was not the one who had just jogged through the streets of Paris, but a man prepping for a world of obligations and contracts. Julian leaned into the mirror, the morning light from the window catching the chiseled line of his jaw. His movements were precise, practiced, a quiet confidence in every stroke as he shaved. This morning ritual was a small, familiar act of control in a city he couldn't predict. As he reached for the aftershave, his arms, a perfect balance of power and definition, were visible, the muscles in his biceps and forearms bunching subtly beneath his skin. He rubbed the scent of dark vetiver and smoky leather into his skin, the rich, complex fragrance, a final, invigorating step in the ritual. He then began to get dressed, a slow and deliberate process. He pulled on a simple white cotton tank top, the fabric clinging to his broad shoulders and the powerful V shape of his torso. The cotton stretched taut across the solid expanse of his pectorals, hinting at the strength of a man who didn't shy from hard work. He pulled on his crisp white shirt, admiring the way the fabric stretched across his broad chest and shoulders. He took his time with the tie, a final, intricate act of preparation before slipping into his tailored suit jacket, the uniform of a life not entirely his own. The man in the mirror was the one he had always been, capable, driven, and in command. But a restless energy pulsed just beneath the surface, a silent question waiting to be answered. Just as he was slipping his watch onto his wrist, his phone buzzed. He already knew who it was without looking. Julian, his father's voice was a low, steady rumble. Just checking in. I assume you're getting ready for the meeting with the Belmonts. Julian replied, his voice calm. Yes, father. I'm on my way now. There was no warmth, no question about how he was doing. Call me as soon as it's done. I will, father, Julian said, the words a familiar, easy lie. He ended the call and slipped the phone back in his pocket. The ache he felt was a dull, familiar weight, obligation and duty over anything else. Julian stepped out of his hotel into the waiting car, fully immersed in his world of business. He was a spectator to a life he didn't have, a freedom he couldn't feel. He stepped into the lobby of the historic hotel, and the hushed formality of the space enveloped him. The meeting was straightforward and clinical. Julian navigated the negotiations with an effortless precision that came from years of practice. He felt a quiet satisfaction in closing the deal, but no joy. The hotel was now theirs, a new asset in his family's portfolio. With the deal done, he took a quiet walk through the hotel's grand halls. His feet carried him to a set of heavy doors at the end of a corridor, and he opened them, finding himself in a small, elegant auditorium. There was a dancer on the stage, and as he watched her, he realized it was her. The woman from the bench. She was completely lost in a dance routine, her movements fluid and free, a ribbon of light and passion. Her ponytail flew as she turned, her body a physical expression of pure joy. Julian stood in the back, captivated, a silent witness to a beauty so profound it made him feel as if he had stumbled upon something sacred. He felt a powerful compulsion to approach her. But just as he took a step forward, a group of other dancers entered. Her private magical moment was over. Julian quietly backed out of the room. He walked to the front desk and asked the receptionist what the dancers were doing. Oh, them? She said with a bright smile. They've been performing here for a few months now. They have a show tonight. You should definitely come watch it. They're amazing. A show, Julian said, the words feeling foreign and intriguing on his tongue. He pulled out his wallet. I'd like to purchase a ticket to tonight's performance. He had no idea what he was doing, but for the first time in a long while, it felt right. That evening, Julian took his seat in the small, elegant auditorium, a quiet sense of anticipation settling over him. The lights dimmed, and the music began. Not the soft classical melodies he expected, but a vibrant, pulsing rhythm that filled the space with energy. When the dancers took the stage, he found his eyes immediately drawn to her. She was in her element, a force of nature. Julian, a man whose life was built on control and calculation, was mesmerized by her complete lack of inhibition. He watched her smile, a joyful, unfiltered expression that he had only glimpsed that morning. In the darkness of the theater, she was the light. When the performance ended, the audience erupted in applause. But Julian's was slow and measured, a silent tribute to her talent. Julian felt a familiar pull toward her. He found himself walking toward the back of the auditorium, where a small line had formed for a meet and greet. He waited patiently, a nervous knot in his stomach. When he finally reached her, she looked up, and a flicker of recognition crossed her eyes. She tilted her head, a small, playful grin spreading across her face. "I think I've seen you here before," she said. "Is it your first time at our show?" "It's my first time," he said. "Your performance was remarkable." He looked into her eyes, feeling they were even more beautiful than when he saw her that morning. "Thanks," she said confidently. Mila couldn't put her finger on it, but she'd seen him before, and as she looked into his eyes, it dawned on her that she had seen him that morning, except he looked different, not so put together. "Julian," he said, as he extended his arm to shake hers. Mila couldn't help but judge him. He seemed so businesslike and refined. She had him pegged another handsome businessman on vacation in Paris. He was a symbol of everything she was trying to get away from. But when she looked into his calm blue eyes, she saw not the confidence of a man who had everything, but a quiet, familiar weariness that mirrored her own. "I think I know where I've seen you before," she began. "Were you at the Trocadero this morning?" At first, a rush of heat rose to Julian's cheeks. He felt like a secret had just been exposed. He hesitated for a moment, a quiet admission in his silence, before a newfound resolve settled over him. Looking as smooth and composed as ever, he simply asked, "Would you like to grab some coffee? Or maybe a meal?" Mila felt a nudge from her friends and caught their encouraging side eyes. "She'd love to," one of them called out cheerfully, earning a narrowed eye glare from Mila. Her friend hooked an arm around hers and began to pull her backstage. "She'll see you out front," Mila's friend managed to say over her shoulder as she pulled Mila away. "What do you think you're doing?" Mila whispered to her friend backstage. "He's cute and you're single," she said with a shrug. "He's not my type," Mila protested. "You always say that," her friend insisted. "I'm serious. He looks pretentious," Mila said, her voice dropping. "You are being awfully judgy, don't you think? Look, it's been a while. It's better than coming home with me to binge on Netflix and popcorn or practicing choreography. Go have fun for once." "I am fun," Mila protested, teasing her friend back. But a playful smile crept onto her face. With a mischievous glint in her eyes, she got changed and headed for the door, ready to prove it. Julian waited out front by a sleek black sedan, the driver standing impassively beside it. He felt like an actor in a play he didn't write. The polished car and the hushed street, a stark contrast to the thrumming energy he'd felt inside the auditorium. He was a man accustomed to waiting, but tonight his impatience was a quiet, nervous knot in his stomach. He was just about to tell the driver the name of a quiet, elegant jazz club he'd researched when the hotel doors opened and she walked out. Mila saw him immediately, a striking figure in his tailored suit, a man who seemed so clearly to belong to a world of privilege and perfect lines. She watched him straighten, his hands going into his pockets, a quiet, almost shy gesture that didn't fit the expensive clothes. He looked so out of place and yet so perfectly himself. She walked straight to the car, a confident stride. She was no longer in her costume, but in an off-shoulder, cream-colored knitted sweater that revealed her collarbones, paired with ripped black skinny jeans that hugged her dancer legs. Black high-heeled sandals completed the look, adding an unexpected edge of glamour to her bohemian style. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, but a few rebellious strands framed her face, catching the light. She glanced at Julian, a small knowing smile on her face. Without a word, she opened the back car door. "You ready?" she asked. He just nodded, and she motioned with her head for him to get in. He slid into the luxurious back seat, a passenger in his own car, and watched as she got on the other side. She leaned forward to give the driver an address, and Julian was a quiet witness to her pulling him into a world he knew nothing about. She was a blur of motion, her movements as fluid and expressive as the music that coursed through the room. Julian found a quiet corner and simply watched, mesmerized by the raw energy she exuded. He saw a man approach her, whispering something in her ear, and her quick, playful dismissal. When she finally found her way back to him, she was laughing, a warm, genuine sound that cut through the noise. She moved closer, her body swaying to the rhythm, a silent invitation in every curve. She reached out and wrapped her fingers around the lapel of his suit jacket, her thumbs slowly tracing the line of his collar. Julian's breath caught in his chest. Her eyes held his, a playful glint in their depths. There was a clear, unspoken question in her gaze, a simple, carefree expectation he was supposed to understand. He knew what she was asking, and for a moment the thought of leaving with her, of surrendering to the desire that was the burning knot in his stomach, was a powerful temptation. But he didn't. He simply took a breath and held her gaze, showing her that he wasn't like the others. By the time they left, the sun was beginning to peek over the horizon. Mila, her face flushed with a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration, grabbed his hand. "Come on," she said. "I want to show you my favorite place to watch the sunrise." She led him to a nearby building, and with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this 100 times, she guided him up a series of fire escapes and ladders. She took off her high-heeled sandals, holding them in one hand as she climbed barefoot, her movements sure and silent. This time Julian didn't hesitate. The climb felt less like a chore and more like an adventure. Finally, they reached the top, stepping out onto a sprawling, zinc-covered rooftop. The city was a glittering tapestry of light and shadow, now softened by the gentle glow of dawn. The Eiffel Tower stood tall and proud in the distance, a beacon of light in the waking city. Julian watched as Mila sat on the edge, her legs dangling over the edge, a carefree smile on her face. He sat down beside her, his heart pounding in his chest. "This is it," she said, a whisper on the wind. "This is the real Paris, not the one in the guidebooks or the postcards. This is the city where people live for the moment." In that moment, he knew his life would never be the same. He was no longer a spectator in his own life. He was a participant ready to step into her world. All was quiet as they simply watched the sun creep over the horizon. The air grew warmer, and the city below began to stir. But on the rooftop, They were in their own quiet universe. Mila broke the silence. She turned to him, her smile a little more knowing now, a silent invitation in her eyes. "Well," she began, her voice gentle but playful. "Where do we go from here?" she said as she moved a little closer, leaning her head onto his shoulder, a casual, intimate gesture that spoke louder than any words. She thought of the elegant hotel lobby he belonged to and the comfortable clean room that was just a short car ride away. She was laying the groundwork, giving him the easy out she thought he wanted. Julian felt a powerful pull to lean in, to kiss her, to take her back to his hotel and let the rest of the night unfold. It was the natural course of action, the easy script he'd followed countless times before. But as he looked at her, truly looked at her in the soft light of the dawn, all he felt was a profound curiosity. He wanted to know the woman in the ripped jeans and high heels, not just a dancer from the stage. He gently shifted, and instead of taking her hand, he simply looked into her eyes. "I'm not surprised you're a dancer," he said, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. "But what else are you when you're not dancing? What were you doing with that notebook?" Mila's confident smile faltered for a moment, surprised by his question. She had expected a different kind of conversation, a different kind of ending to the night. She expected to be an anonymous conquest, a passing fantasy in a city of fleeting moments. He was supposed to want her body, not her story. She looked into his eyes and found a sincerity she was not used to. Her playful persona melted away. "I write songs," she admitted, the words barely audible. "I hope that one day they'll get picked up by someone who's gonna sing and be famous," she laughed to herself, a small nervous sound that revealed her vulnerability, as if her dream could be a joke since it wasn't reality yet. Julian didn't laugh. He just looked at her and saw past her confident facade and her free spirit. It was evident in her performance on stage and how she looked like she could dance the night away at the last place they were at. He listened, staring off into the city of lights while sitting beside her as he asked her questions, and she answered them freely, with little hesitation. With Mila, it was like she was an open book, nothing to hide, dreams and aspirations she'd be willing to share because nothing was going to stop her. She was free to pursue them, and she didn't care about what anyone else thought. The next evening, Julian returned, arriving just as the performance ended. This time he wasn't a businessman or a tourist. He was a participant. The 24 roses he carried felt less like a gift and more like a surrender. When she emerged, all grace and movement, he felt as if he was part of her world, not just a spectator. A radiant smile lit up her face as she took the flowers and then his hand. She didn't lead him to his car. Instead, she guided him toward the bicycles. He glanced down at his tailored suit and then at her, but he didn't protest. He simply got on the bike. The air was cool on their faces as they rode, their laughter echoing through the city streets. With every revolution of the pedals, Julian felt a layer of his old life fade away. He wasn't just following her, he was being led into a world he didn't know he was looking for. A world where the future was unwritten and the only obligation was to the present moment. They finally arrived at a dark, quiet park. She led him down a path to a moonlit lake. As she began unbuttoning her dress, he said, "It's cold." She just gave him a look that said, "So what?" and walked into the water. He stood there for a second. The tailored suit felt like a cage, a symbol of a life he was no longer sure he wanted. He let it drop to the ground. The cold night air hit his skin, a stark difference from the heat building inside him. He swallowed and held his breath as he stepped into the water. The cold was a shock, but it was a good one, a jolt that cleared his mind. He waded toward her silhouette a dark, perfect shape in the moonlight on the water. Her curves, subtle in the shifting light, were a perfect line against the shimmering surface. She bobbed gently, her hair flowing around her like a dark halo. He began to swim, cutting through the cold water with a single clear purpose. She met him in the middle, her arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer. He felt her smooth skin against his, the warmth of her body, a stark contrast to the cold water surrounding them. The physical pull was intense. He looked into her eyes, dark and glittering in the moonlight, and felt a raw, magnetic force. There was no going back. He pulled her in for a passionate kiss, a desperate, breathless moment that sealed their escape from the world. The kiss was long and deep, a final act of letting go. Julian's hands found their place on the small of her back, pulling her against his body. In the icy water, the warmth of their bodies was a small, burning universe of its own. It radiated between them, a fire that pushed back against the cold. When their lips finally parted, they were both breathless, shivering from the cold but burning from the inside. They didn't say anything. The silence was louder than any words. Julian's arms tightened around her waist, and with a slow, deliberate grace, Mila wrapped her legs around his waist, straddling him in the water as they kissed in the moonlight. Eventually, the cold caught up with them, and Mila was the first to speak. "We should get out," she whispered. He just nodded. They waded back to the shore, the cold air hitting their wet skin. They grabbed their clothes and dressed quickly, their fingers fumbling with buttons and zippers. The moment they were both dressed, she instinctively moved into his arms, and he pulled her close. They stood there, holding each other, his chin resting on the top of her head. He could feel her warmth, a small fire against the cold. He knew right then that this was no longer just a fling. This was real. The days blurred into a beautiful stolen rhythm. Julian found himself losing track of time, of meetings, of the world he was supposed to return to. His phone, once a constant hum of obligation, was now mostly silent. He had delayed his flight home twice already, a small act of rebellion that felt bigger than any business deal he had ever closed. He saw the number pop up on the screen, his father's. Julian stared at it for a long second, the name a heavy weight in his hand, before the screen went dark. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, silencing the world he wanted to leave behind. One night, as they walked along the Seine, the city lights reflecting the water, Julian finally told her, "I came here to close a hotel acquisition. It was really important to my father," he said quietly. He told her about the pressure, about the legacy he was expected to uphold. He spoke of a life that felt like a perfectly tailored suit. It fit, but it wasn't his. Mila listened, her hand resting lightly on his arm. When he finished, she smiled, a sad, knowing expression on her face. She could tell how hard it was for him to share those feelings with her. She turned to look at him. "That's a lot for one man to carry around," she said. "Can I tell you something? I'm the good daughter that ran away," she said. "I left my hometown and all their expectations to perform, to sing and dance and write songs. And it's not glamorous. But when I'm on stage under those lights, it feels real. And it feels like me." She was anything but the good daughter, but she was happy. As they continued their stroll, Julian was reflecting like the moonlit waters, not really knowing where he was going next. The lecture came 2 days later, a cold, sharp voice on the phone that cut through the romantic bubble they had built. "Julian," his father's voice was a low rumble. "This is not how we conduct business. You're being reckless. The clients are asking where you are and you're just disappearing. This isn't like you." "I closed the deal, Father," Julian replied, his voice calm, but with an edge of defiance. "The hotel is ours." "I know it's ours. I also know you're still in Paris," his father continued, his voice hardening. "I've had you followed. Whoever this girl is, she's no good for you. She's distracting you from your life and responsibilities. She's a performance artist, for God's sake, Julian. Do you know how that looks?" Julian felt a hot surge of anger. "You had me followed?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "You left me no choice. Come home now. This isn't a conversation," his father said, and the line went dead. Julian stood there, the phone heavy in his hand, the comfortable, familiar ache in his chest replaced by a sharp, burning anger. The resentment burned for the rest of the day, a hot, bitter reminder of the life he was running from. He had avoided his father's calls for a while, but this time the words had cut him to the bone. It took 2 days for his mind to finally calm, for Mila's presence to soothe the sharp edges of his anxiety. He never mentioned the call. Instead, he simply held her a little closer as they walked through the streets of Paris. They'd passed through a tunnel beneath the Arc de Triomphe, where the mournful sweet notes of an accordionist filled the air. The music was a bittersweet melody, a perfect soundtrack to his own conflicted heart. He let the magic of Paris slowly wash away the harsh reality of his other world, finding a temporary solace in her warmth and the city's timeless beauty. The Eiffel Tower glittered against the deep blue of the night sky, 1,000 dancing lights in a symphony of gold. It was Julian's last night, the flight home leaving in the morning. He and Mila stood on the observation deck, watching the city laid out before them like a sea of diamonds. Julian felt a familiar knot of anxiety in his stomach, a physical representation of the life he had to return to. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. His father's name was on the screen again. He didn't answer. He simply placed the phone in his pocket, silencing the world again, and took Mila's hand. He just wanted to be here, in this moment, a quiet onlooker to his own life for once. She saw it all, the conflict, the pull of the world he belonged to. He was here, but he was also 1,000 miles away, and her heart ached with the knowledge that this beautiful temporary bubble they had built would burst with the sunrise. They were supposed to be strangers, a fleeting Parisian fling, a one-night stand with no expectations. She hadn't expected to feel so exposed, so seen, and it terrified her. This wasn't supposed to be so raw, so authentic. Mila watched him, her eyes searching his. She turned to him, her expression soft but serious. "Julian," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What do you want?" He looked from her to the city, which stretched out below like a million tiny, glittering stars. The Eiffel Tower, a beacon of gold, shimmered and sparkled, casting a magical glow over everything. For a moment, all his problems, his father's voice, the heavy weight of duty, the life he was expected to live, simply fell away. They were just two people standing on a bridge, looking down at a world that felt impossibly vast and beautiful. He turned to her, his gaze finally clear. He reached out and caught a stray strand of her hair, twirling it softly between his fingers. He looked into her eyes, and in their depths, bathed in the glow of the city lights, he knew. He didn't know what he wanted from his life, but he knew with an absolute, undeniable certainty that he wanted her. He wanted to be with her. That was all he knew. He slid one hand to her waist, the other to the back of her head, and pulled her in for a kiss, wanting to forget that anything existed except for them. It was a slow, deliberate kiss. He wanted to truly taste her, to feel her connecting with him. As his lips met hers, he tasted the cool, crisp air of the Paris mornings he had spent running, the subtle echoes of their steps on cobblestone paths, and the warmth of the sun on a zinc rooftop. He tasted the golden shades in her blonde hair and the bittersweet, hopeful melody of an accordion playing in a tunnel. He breathed in her scent, a delicate mix of flowers, the exhilarating air of Paris streets, and the warm, cozy scent of bakeries. This was the taste of his new life, a future he had finally chosen for himself. He held her there, a quiet, perfect stillness at the heart of the glittering city. He didn't say a word, but the kiss was his answer. It was a promise to a new life, a silent testament to a future he would find a way to build with her. In that moment, he didn't just feel like he was changing his world. He felt like he was changing the world with her.